Palantir shareholders, cheers. $50. Yes, $50 has been hit on Palantir stock. The top of this video here today, I want to react to what's going on in regards to Palantir stock price. A lot of people are shocked, absolutely shocked. This stock is now trading $50 plus. Comes as no surprise to me at all. If you watched my video last night, you've been watching my Palantir videos and kind of my earnings setup and whatnot. This has kind of been my expectation on kind of what would happen to Palantir stock if they came in and they announced 30% plus revenue growth, right? And so that's exactly what they did. And here we are, $50. So we'll talk about, is this time to cash some Palantir shares? Does it make sense? Does it not? Are you going to regret that? We'll speak about all that in this video, and I thought that would be a very important subject. After we get through that, we're going to go ahead and we'll react to this video from Tom Lee speaking about where he believes the market is going from here, the stock market's going from here. I want to react to this gentleman who says this bull market has a lot of time left. That should be an interesting one to react to. And then the professor, Jeremy Siegel, he went on 4 hours ago, spoke about where he views the market and what he expects to happen here. So yeah, a lot to get into. All I need from you guys is hit that like button, and hit that like button again. I appreciate y'all for being here. Additionally, if you're not subscribed to the channel, you might want to do so. We just hit a new all-time high of subscribers on the history of the channel, okay? For the pinned comment down there today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my X and I'm going to put my Instagram. So if you're interested in following me on X or you're interested in following me on Instagram, that will be the pinned comment down there here today, okay? So Palantir is now, look at this. You're going to be flipping my flapjacks. It's beating NVIDIA. NVIDIA! Year to date. Who would have thought? Like Palantir would overtake NVIDIA on a year to date. Absolutely unbelievable, right? Unbelievable. I mean, it's just, you know, what else can I say about it? That's insane. Like to be beating NVIDIA, that's a tough stock to beat, man. That's a tough stock to beat. And yet Palantir is doing it. So, great day. Now, here's my view on Palantir, right? Obviously, I spoke super in depth about it on the main channel last night. So if you didn't get to check out that video on the main channel, check out that video. That's a 40-minute beast going all into Palantir and super in-depth thoughts, right? I just really want to focus this talk about kind of Palantir stock price, right? This is the first time in years that if anybody wanted to take some profits here, it's the first time that at least I could understand people taking profits. And that's a big statement because I could tell you I've not agreed with anybody really taking profits in this one when it hit $10, when it hit $15, when it hit $20, when it hit $25, when it hit $30, when it hit $40, when it hit $45. This is a first price level that you might still regret it long term, by the way, taking profits now, but at least I get it. Like if somebody says, you know what, I'm going to take some off the table here, respect. Like now this is a first price. Now that it's over $50, I'm like, okay, at least get it. Like, you know, respect, take some profits. And I have not agreed with that the whole run. Am I taking any off the table here today? The answer to that is no. Not interested. I don't want to play the timing game. Although I think the stock, if you watched my video last night, I spoke extensively about not just the numbers, but the stock price. I think the stock price is now going to basically flounder between 45 and 55 for the next 6 to 9 months. The next 6 to 9 months, I think it's just going to flounder around. I don't want to try to time in and out of this one, and I really don't have any ambition to sell shares. I just don't have a reason. The company's executing too well. The numbers are too impressive. Alex Karp's doing a hell of a job. The product's too good. And so for me, I have no interest. I have no interest in kind of trying to play this timing game, even though I do believe the stock will just kind of flounder for a while now at this point in time. So that's my view on it. And at the end of the day, I already have new fresh money that I'm putting into a lot of the value stocks, a lot of the dividend stocks, things like that. I don't need to cash Palantir shares to have money to put into other places, right? And so, and the other thing that is a little scary to me about taking profits in Palantir and why I'm scared to take profits in Palantir, I got to be honest with you guys, we don't know where the top is with these growth rates. All we see is revenue acceleration quarter after quarter after quarter. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we have now accelerated revenue percentage growth 6 quarters in a row. The earnings per share keeps coming in better and better than expectations are, right? So for me, it's very difficult to say, I personally want to go cash Palantir shares today, even though I do believe the stock will flounder for the next 6 to 9 months and just to be range bound, it's still extremely hard for me to go cash any shares today when I'm like, I don't even know where the top is for revenue growth. Like we just hit a 30% number. Who's to say next quarter we don't hit 32 or 33%? And who's to say the next quarter after that we don't hit 35% or 37% year over year, right? So that to me is difficult. And that to me is why I can't say in the public account here today, I can't go ahead and cash that, any of those 5,555 shares. I just can't do it. I just can't do it. And so I'm willing to hold this stock and have it do nothing for the next 6 to 9 months, right? I would rather that be the situation than go cash shares and then the revenue growth goes to 35% or 40%. And I look back and I'm like, what the hell was I doing? Because then the stock's trading $70, $75, right? So that's my view on this one. And that's where I'm at in regards to Palantir. And so this is a great moment as a Palantir shareholder, though, isn't it? Because we're at that moment now as a Palantir shareholder where at least you can have a conversation about, does it make sense to take some profits or not? And that's beautiful. We're not talking about taking losses. We're not talking about taking small profits. Most people that have been in the stock over the last 2 years, you've made either life-changing money or just ridiculous returns, right? For some people, this is life-changing money. For other folks like myself, like this is just big money. Like we just made a lot of money in a fairly short amount of time. Remember, this is like in a matter of like 2 years, right? And I mean, look at the gains, $232,000 in gains, 473%. I mean, that's incredible, right? So, yeah, beautiful. Respect. If anybody wants to take profits, respect. If people are like myself and they're like, nah, I have no interest in taking profits. I don't care if the stock stagnates for 6, 12 months, whatever. Like I'm on this ride for the next, 3, 5, 7, 10 years. Respect as well. Okay. Alrighty, let's get into some of these videos. Tom Lee,
managing partner and head of research at Fundstrat Global Advisors, as well as a CNBC contributor. Would you say towards the last time you were on, you talked about the Trump trade being pretty strong. A lot of things turned back, reversed. DJT reversed. Bitcoin didn't move into the mid-70s, got into the low 70s. I don't know whether the banks and other Trump trades changed, and all the betting markets certainly moderated late last week, came back a little bit. Do you have a change in your opinion on the election now?
Well, it does seem like over the last 4 or 5 days, the election really narrowed when you look at betting markets or the polls. And I know a lot of people don't necessarily trust polls, but I think the quality and the adjustments the polls have made them more accurate. So I think it is really a toss-up, and it's going to be a very close election. And something our clients are preparing for, because we did a survey last week, 76% don't think we'll have a winner declared election night. And 43% roughly expect it 1 week after. So I think markets are kind of bracing for this period of uncertainty. I think that's why many of the trades have reversed.
We've also heard about some of the trading houses that are not going to be putting any software updates in this week, even some people who want to be here rather than overseas to make sure they're closer on the ground to see what happens too.
I'm just so confused by the election's close. I just don't see it being close. Like I think this is just my personal belief as somebody that doesn't even vote, but I just looked at everything objectively. I look at the data. I look at what's going on out there. I don't see this election being close. I think Trump's going to win easily. I don't think it's going to be a contested election. Maybe I'm wrong. I just don't see it. Trump has won the men. He'll be weak when it comes to women that really care a lot about the abortion issue, right? Even though he's not like some, I don't want to get into the specifics of that whole situation, right? But the moral of the story is I don't see this election being close. I think he's going to do way better than with minorities than he did in either of his previous elections, 2016 or 2020. I think he's going to blow those numbers out of the water. I don't even think it's going to be close. And so I have a lot of trouble believing this is actually a close election, but who knows? I'm not a professional, election forecaster. I invest in stocks, and I do that pretty dang well, right? But we'll see. We'll see. Just from my data, I'm like, I don't see this being a close election. We'll see.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be a week where there's going to be a lot of worry. One thing I was thinking about over the weekend, though, is I think the market's fear of uncertainty will peak before. It's very likely it peaks before the election outcome's actually decided.
These signals that we've been looking at, one of the things, I don't know if you read about it, and I think we talked about it during commercial break last week. One of the things that's happened in the polls is the view that there's a lot more women going to vote than before. But that
yes, another demographic that I think Trump's going to do way better at than he did in the previous two elections is with the younger generation. I think he's going to do way better with the people under 30 than he did in 2016 and 2020. And I think it's going to be a substantial difference.
These signals, whether it be Bitcoin or whether it be DJT stock or whether it be the betting markets, may also all be off, if this is true, on the assumption that actually there is a very small percentage of the people in the betting markets who are women.
Yeah,
for example,
that's true.
There's a very small
true.
percentage of people who are women who actually trade in Bitcoin, not who own Bitcoin, but who trade in Bitcoin.
True.
Very
that's true as well.
Small group of women who are trading in.
That's high level thoughts there. That's seriously high level thoughts. Good respect on that.
DJT stock. What do you think of that?
That's true. 100%.
I think there's some credence to that, just because we know, like when you look at the Iowa polls, it was really the senior women voters that changed a lot. And you're right, these markets can be narrow, and they're very responsive to just changes in liquidity. And I think it's a very tight race. I mean, it's going to be very close. I think anyone who thinks that they know who's going to win is really playing with fate, because I think it's a very tight race.
Yeah.
That's me, Tom Lee. I believe it's not close.
When polls close, too, because we've got, there's a couple here. Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia are all East Coast. So, if you have some definitive answers. They're also, supposedly Virginia and New Hampshire are closer than people in the Harris camp would like. So there could be surprises early on.
Just wonder how long it takes when you have so many more people who have voted early or mail-in votes too. Those take longer to tally. So you might just by default be
like last time.
Yeah. I actually voted last week, and I actually had to wait.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people. Turnout is really what's going to swing this election.
And there's a number of states, obviously, that, by the way, get the early votes and then don't begin to tally them afterwards. And for all sorts of reasons that I would raise some real questions about why they're not tallying them.
It's kind of a bummer when we see it.
Sometimes it's written into state legislation.
No, I understand that, but there's a view among those who are cynical about that they're not counting them until after, so that.
And there are we've seen it.
Except for what if
there's other countries that know by the end of the day. There's other countries that know that night, and they've been talking. We're like a little bit envious looking around.
Yeah, you should be able to count.
Here's the problem: if they were counting them early and it was some secret, because you wouldn't want them releasing what the vote count was early. What if it got out? That's the problem with starting the count early.
I have not heard that as the explanation for it,
I'm just
and it's only red states that have done this. So there's you can think whatever you want to think about that.
So other than the election, because the elections, that's sort of what you hear about Wall Street. Elections don't really matter anyway. So if it is gridlock, which we don't know.
By the way, in regards to people on the desk, I'm like 90% sure that this gentleman's a Democrat. I'm like 90% sure this man's a Republican. And Becky Quick, I have no clue. I think she might lean Democrat, but I'm not sure. She might be an independent. As somebody that's watched these guys for many, many years, just trying to kind of guess what I believe they are. Democrat, Republican, probably an independent. She could probably go either way.
That's sort of what you hear about Wall Street. Elections don't really matter anyway. So if it is gridlock, which we don't know, but more likely, I think the odds are on that too. So you're still bullish.
Yeah, I'm bullish only in the sense that election uncertainty has caused people to de-risk and cash to sit on the sidelines, but the fundamentals have been good. Earnings season's been very good. The Fed is dovish, and I don't think it's going to matter who ends up in the White House. Even if it's split Congress or a sweep, I think markets do pretty well either way. So it sets up for a really good rally into year end. But when it starts in November is just what we don't know.
No. So when you look at we were talking about what Buffett's thinking with Apple or what he's thinking with bank. I mean, that you take Apple and a leading financial, and that covers a pretty big range of the markets. And Andrew thinks he's building an ark. Could you really? It wouldn't work. There's too many species to bring on there with him.
I'm just saying he's building a cash ark.
Cash ark.
An ark out of cash or something. Or is that what he's doing? He may be doing something else. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I know part of it is he's anticipating capital gains taxes could change, so he's taking those gains now. And he's not necessarily having a big cost of money because he's earning 5%. But next year, the cost of money is going to drop, so he'll have some pressure to deploy it.
That's interesting. Yeah, I am going to be very interested to see what Buffett does with all the money in 2025. Like, let's say we don't get the big crash. Like, obviously, if there's some sort of big crash in the market, then he's going to deploy the money out there, right? That's obvious. But let's say 2025, not a bad year. Let's say the market is flat. Let's say the market slightly uptrends, right? What does Buffett do with all that money? Does he just keep it in treasuries all of 2025? Or does he go make some buys? I'm really intrigued to see that. It's going to be very interesting. And also in 2025, does he build the cash position bigger? That's another big question. Like, could he build it even bigger and take it up to $350 billion or $400 billion, which is just, I mean, the amounts are just insane, right? Alrighty, next one up here. I want to listen to this gentleman on the bull market. Still has a lot of time left.
But there's a ton of market-moving action coming next week for investors, including the presidential election, a Fed decision, and even more earnings with nearly 20% of S&P 500 companies getting ready to report. Let's bring in Ryan Dietrich, Chief Market Strategist at Carson Group. Ryan, it's great to have you on. The other piece of this puzzle is seasonality. We just finished up October, which is historically notoriously tumultuous. We did see that sell-off yesterday coming into the close, and we've started November pretty strongly. Is this a turning tide that needs to be factored in?
Yeah, we think so. TGIF, everyone. So you think about it, October in an election year is the worst month. So is it surprising that the 5-month win streak ended last month? We don't think so. And then you look at November, and this is just seasonality, yes, but 11 of the last 12 years, stocks were higher in November. Since 1950, the best month. The last 10 years, the best month. In an election year, it's the best month. So we can get into some of the weeds of this, but we really do think once we get through the uncertainty of this election, and the Fed is going to cut, I don't think he's going to rock the boat there. This upward bias, this bull market price still has a lot of time left, but maybe a little bit of a trick up the sleeve in November is what we're thinking here.
All right. So in light of that, how do you position yourself for all of these potentially market-moving events next week? What matters most, or you really sort of have to game it all out?
Yeah, I mean, listen, let me answer this way. We're taken to the dance who got us here, right? We like the cyclicals, right? We don't see a recession. Look at the data we've seen. The economy's slowing. Yeah, there's some slowing, but, your industrials, your financials. This week, small caps were higher, okay? Mid caps did well. The Dow was flat. I know the headline says stocks were down, but the reality, again, this broadening out theme is really taking place. We'll talk about the Fed for a second here. So the Fed's going to cut next week. That's fine. We took a look. We're 2.3% away from an all-time high, by the way, right now. We looked, Morgan, when the Fed cuts, when the S&P is within 2% of an all-time high back to 1980. All the listeners need to know, stocks were higher a year later, 20 out of 20 times. Okay, so if we're near all-time highs, the Fed cuts next week, that's just one other way to look at it, that the Fed is no longer a headwind. They're a tailwind for sure here.
Ryan, I hear what you're saying about history, but if we can pull up a year-to-date chart of the S&P 500, if you show people this, I mean, it doesn't look like October is the worst month because it's hard to tell exactly where October is on that. And I would be shocked. I've been shocked before, but I would be shocked if November is the best month of this year when we've seen this kind of gains. This is different, isn't it?
Well, great point there. I mean, this is like the best election year ever going into the election, right? I think 1980 was better by the end of the year, but this year isn't over. But I want to talk about the VIX for a second here, because great point. Everybody knows there's going to be volatility next week, or at least you assume there will be. So the VIX has obviously been higher, even though we've been kind of calm. I know we had the big drop yesterday, but for the most part, the last 30 trading days have been really calm. once you get through the election, all those kind of put buyers and all the VIX calls that we've been seeing, John, those could unwind, right? Those people have to kind of unwind those. And again, that's why we think this upward bias is still alive. And I'm with you. We probably don't gain 10% this November. I'm not saying that. But can stocks gain a couple percent here in November and maybe even into December? Yeah, we really think that this is still a chance for investors to enjoy this bull market.
So how does, though, an investor put on some protection without being optimistic?
Yeah, great question. So we manage money, Carson Group. A diversified portfolio is the easiest way to do it, right? I mean, we're overweight equities. We have been since December of 22. Wasn't popular when we did it, but now people have kind of come on. But we do have some bond exposure, right? People can own some gold. You can own some cash. You can own some of the more defensive areas. We don't like those defensive areas as much as I said. But I think it's just really important for your average listener out there who's got a 401k, puts it in every 2 weeks. We're going to have volatility. That's fine. But the next 6 months, okay, November through, I guess, the end of April, it is the best 6 months of the year, okay? I mean, and when you have a good sell in May, go away period like we just did, the returns get even better. So listen, there's always something to worry about. Diversified portfolio helps a lot of that, but this is still a bull market, we think.
All right. So, Ryan, the other thing we haven't talked about, which is not domestic, is China. You've got this MPC meeting next week. We're expecting more policy details regarding stimulus. How much does that matter? And how much of that is potentially a dark horse more broadly to equities?
Yeah, listen, I guess it depends how much EM exposure someone has. I'll put it this way. We haven't liked EM for a while, mainly because we're not crazy about China. Now, there are some slow growth issues. China has a ton of debt. I know they're trying to grease the wheels, get things going. But overall, that can cause some volatility. I think at least for the U.S. and someone who's U.S.-centric, like probably a lot of listeners are, what happens here with the Fed and the election matters more. But with China, we're still underweight. We're still not buying it yet. We still need to see economic growth. We're just not seeing it.
Yeah, I was just having some in-depth conspiracy theory thoughts about the oligarchs and they actually controlling the elections and things like that. Should I take you guys down that path? Okay, so let's. There's some people believe that the people do not actually control the elections, right? It's like this oligarch, and like they're like little puppet masters, and they're actually controlling like who we want to vote for and who actually wins the elections and things like that, right? So there could be a belief that they put Biden in office in 2021 because we already had inflation spiking, right? And so of the understanding of let's let in massive amounts of immigrants to relieve the wage pressure we had at that particular time, right? Which has now been completely relieved. So now the view could be from these puppet masters that we don't need more people coming in now, so we need to put Trump back in office so we can basically mitigate that because inflation is no longer an issue, right? And you could go down this rabbit hole in regards to China needing some help sometimes versus kind of being anti-China and making sure the United States is always in the premier position without letting China leapfrog us, but also not hurting China so bad because we don't want to hurt China too bad because China, at the end of the day, they are very important to the worldwide economy and so many other companies. So there's just a whole bunch of game theory you can play there and really go down the whole conspiracy theory rabbit hole. But anyways, let's get into the Professor Jeremy Siegel.
Finance at the Wharton School of Business. He's also chief economist at Wisdom Tree. And Jeremy, we've got a Fed meeting this week, but I guess that's overshadowed by the election. What do you think about the election's potential impact on the stock and bond markets?
Well, first, Becky, I think if it's, it's pretty clean one way or the other, we don't have something you guys were talking about, Bush, Gore, hanging Chad. If it isn't that close, if it's decisive either for Harris or Trump, I think there'll be a relief. I mean, that there's less likely to be huge challenges and uncertainty, and just getting that uncertainty behind us, I think, is positive. If there's if there's a Republican sweep of House, Senate, and the presidency, I expect the bond market to be wobbly. I expect them to be worried that Trump would enact all those tax cuts, and I think bond yields would rise. I think a split Congress, whoever wins the presidency, is probably the favorite for the markets, so that neither candidate can get his or her full plan pushed through. So I think that a lot of it does depend on the House or the Senate. I think the Senate would be pretty clear. I mean, the betting markets are over 80% for a Republican takeover of the Senate, but the House looks very close, and that may take days to be decided. But that could be very, very important in terms of how the market will react.
Hey, Jeremy, no matter what happens in the House, it's not going to be a big majority one direction or the other. So maybe that in itself is a bit of a hung jury situation, no matter what happens, because we've seen how difficult it is to control the House when you only have a few votes, 5 or fewer.
Well, that's true if it's that close. But as we all know, the Trump tax cuts enacted, in his first term are going to expire on December 31st of next year. Right. And the House, I would say, I mean, if they want to push through his tax cuts and extend it for another 7 years, I even think those radical members of the Republican Party would be voting for that. So a close one, even in the House, I think, would still give the Republicans an edge on getting their tax through. So I think that that's still going to be important in terms of whether all three are controlled by one or the other.
Jeremy, you mentioned the betting markets for the Senate, 80%. So 80 sounds like something that gives you some confidence. But beyond that, how effective do you, as a Wharton guy, how do you view betting markets versus polls? And both of them, some have their strengths in both, weaknesses in both. You need to use both. Is one or the other better? As additional facts come in, betting markets can totally flip from 90-10 to 10-9. And we know, and I mentioned earlier, Wisconsin was up 17 for Biden, and when it was all said and done, he won by 1. So, are either one of them?
Neither are listen. Neither, of course, are perfect. There could be big errors. The betting markets, to me, are the most accurate. The war that the government had against those betting markets, trying to close them down for the presidential was a big disservice, I think, to Americans. Academics were opposed because we use those betting markets in terms of understanding how markets react to different predictions. I think in the very recent days, we've seen that turn back to Trump. Now, I would honestly say I think Poly market is probably a little Trump biased, but Kalshi predicted, and the others are moved together. They're a little bit less Trump than the Poly market, and you can understand why. But they're basically moving together, and they have given a turn to Trump in the last 24 hours. I think some of the very recent polls, the Atlas and Emerson, have not been quite as good as the trend might have been hoped by the Harris administration. But again, they're betting the House to be nearly 50-50, even if they're giving Trump 60-40 on that. So that is going to be very, very close. And I don't know if we will know the House by the end of the day.
See, and you can tell, the market's kind of pricing in a Trump victory here because the stocks that are really moving are the exact stocks I would figure would move if Trump won. SoFi, Tesla, a lot of the small cap stocks like Honest, Cheesecake, right? And those are sorts of stocks that will move big up if Trump wins the election. I think those have like a very nice 3-month move that will be pretty epic. And a stock like Honest ends up getting out of the gulag finally and gets over that $5 the positioning there. So, alrighty guys, appreciate you joining me as always. Once again, pin comment down there today if you want to follow me on X or you want to follow me on Instagram. I'll put those as pinned comment. If you want to apply for my private stock group, get access to my private Discord chat, exclusive videos, all that stuff, they'll be in the description area down there. Much love and have a great day.